You may not be aware of the ongoing US-backed Saudi genocide of Yemenis, and it's been going on now. It started during the Obama administration in 2014, and it's been ongoing. So the US has been helping with this, helping the Saudis basically take control of Yemen, and in the process, as usual, collective punishment of Yemenis. And that's something that the US is renowned for, is collective punishment, like they've done in Venezuela with the 40,000 Venezuelans now dead due to crippling economic sanctions. And the similar things are happening in Iran with 800 economic sanctions. That's crippling. And in Yemen, this is sort of a collective punishment of Yemenis. And basically now they're on the brink of, they've been basically dying at a rate of one child every 10 minutes for some time now. As far as I understand, I don't know if it waxes and wanes, but when I was talking about this a year ago, that's what the figures were, or a year and a half ago. And the World Food Programme is warning Yemen is headed toward the biggest famine in modern history, with the UN agency projecting around 400,000 Yemeni children under the age of 5 could die from acute malnutrition this year as the Saudi war and blockade continues. Interestingly, in this, I'm going to show you something from Democracy Now! And please note, Democracy Now!, I don't recommend Democracy Now! It's good for headlines, but it's actually bought into a lot of the imperialist narratives of the US national security state. And it's terrible on China, it doesn't really present the story. It's not good on Russia either. So, but for some issues like Palestine and Yemen, it seems to be okay, I think. And it's good for headlines. So I'm using this source today because it actually has a fairly good interview with a CNN correspondent of all people. I don't know what CNN has been doing the last 6 years while this has been going on. I don't think they've done much, if anything at all. So it's interesting that now they've gone in, one of their reporters has gone in, is actually doing journalism, which is something CNN doesn't do and hasn't done for a long time now. So I'm not sure if it's because the Biden administration has been feigning interest in the plight of the Yemenis and pretending as if everything is okay or is going to be okay when it's actually not. The UN ambassador to Yemen is sort of basically indicating that things should be okay when they're obviously not. And Samantha Power, who is from USAID now, she's an imperialist warmonger. She and the USAID is kind of like a CIA cutout, really. So, I don't know what she's doing, and the UN doesn't have much funding, and there needs to be about $4 billion, billion with a B, to actually turn this around, and also ending the blockade of fuel. If they don't have any fuel, they can't get supplies to people, and there are trucks just standing around with food rotting in the sun that cannot get to Yemeni people. And this is all the fault of the US-backed Saudi genocide, which has been going on for 6 years now. It's incredible, really, and I have to say that I've done a few videos on this now over the last few years, since I started this podcast 3 years ago. And, there's this saying, it's a speciesist saying, but it's a saying nonetheless, which I agree with, and that is, you can tell a lot about society by the way it treats its animals. Now, it's a speciesist saying, and there's no such thing as non-abusive use of animals, and even if there were, it would still be wrong. But it indicates the way we eat, wear, and use animals, the way we use them, basically, they're sentient beings, says a lot about us as a society. And I've regularly said, and some other people have said this, that the use of animals and the way we use animals and the way we kill them by the trillion, by 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year, this doesn't stay in a vacuum. How we treat the most vulnerable on the planet, non-human animals, is how we will eventually treat humans. And you can see that in Palestine, and you can see it in Yemen. There have been other places too, but this is currently the thing. It indicates the way this is able to go on now for 6 years, and one child dying of famine and disease every 10 minutes, basically indicates a sort of a spiritual death collectively of humanity. If people, and I'm not sure exactly how many people on the planet know this is going on, but if we know it's going on and we're not saying anything and we're not protesting vehemently against this, then what does that say about us? That we're white supremacist racists that don't care about other people except for our own country people in the West? I mean, really, what does it say about us? I tell you what it says about the Biden administration, by the way, that Biden was the VP for Obama, and this is when this started, when he was vice president. So, you know, everybody goes on about how I wish we had Obama back. Wow, what a clueless statement that is. That's just one of many things. Expanding 2 wars to 7, all that kind of thing. Deporting 2 million children. Deporting 2 million people, migrants. The ongoing ICE and its racist terrorism down at the border. All those kind of things. I love the way people just have this amnesia, as if Biden suddenly appeared on the scene and doesn't have 40 years of warmongering under his belt. So is it any surprise, this is allowed to happen ongoing? And is it any surprise that there are people, that they passed on the $15 minimum wage, or they won't give US citizens Medicare for all, even in a pandemic? Is it any surprise when this is going on with the knowledge of Biden and Kamala Harris? And they're pretending like they're doing something when they're not really. This is all a sort of the narratives that they're spinning in reality on the ground is not doing anything for the people of Yemen. And when you see this, I haven't been able to watch this Democracy Now! Report because I cannot handle the I cannot handle the images of, just as I can't handle images of animals being tortured for our food and all this kind of thing, clothing and all of that. I can't handle images of young children starving to death, emaciated, skeletal, and basically almost unconscious and doing death rattles and all that kind of thing. I can't handle it. So I haven't watched this. I've read the transcript, which is on the Democracy Now! Site. If you want to read it, just go to democracynow.org, and please note this is an endorsement of Democracy Now! They're only good for certain things, and this seems to be something that they're actually reporting on properly, without covering up for the US. But I can't handle images of starving children. So I'm going to show this to you, this report, and you'll probably know when to look away if you're like me and you cannot handle that sort of thing. But I'm showing it because there might be people that aren't even aware, if my channel ever gets any. YouTube is so busy crippling and suffocating anti-imperialist channels. It probably may not see the light of day beyond a handful of people on my actual channel. But I'm hoping that maybe someone will see it outside of the people who subscribe to Faint Signals from Vega, and that's why I'm showing it. And maybe they won't even maybe they'll say, maybe they'll put some other censorship thing on me because, just because. That's what they do every so often, like they did with a video I did a couple of days ago, which simply had some images of, no graphic images or anything, but they actually put 4 different blocks before you could actually view it. It was only 4 minutes long, and it was about neoliberalism and imperialism, and apparently the public can't handle 4 minutes of reality, and where there's not even any graphic images. But apparently that goes beyond community standards on YouTube to show the reality of without even any graphic images. So that tells you a lot about YouTube. The real left's time is limited on YouTube. Anyway, so they may allow this to go through without putting some censorship on it. Who knows? Democracy Now! Managed to have that up on their site. So if they end up censoring my channel because I put this up, then that says a lot about their, that says a lot about YouTube. Anyhow, so the CNN senior international correspondent Nima El-Begir says Yemen is accurately described as hell on earth. And I haven't had a look back on CNN's site to see if they've done any reporting on Yemen. I'd be surprised if they have. They might do one, we might be lucky and they may have done 1 or 2 in the last 6 years, but they tend to always protect the Democrats. And since it started during the Obama administration, they probably have barely done anything at all. So this is interesting that they should do this. And I suppose I should be happy that they've done this and put it on CNN so people can see what's actually happening. Do you remember when Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State in the 90s under George Bush Sr., when this woman on 60 Minutes asked her, was it worth it that there were 500,000 Iraqi children died of economic sanctions, US economic sanctions in the 90s? And she said, yes, I think that was worth it. Well, that sort of attitude hasn't changed. This isn't some recent phenomena associated with US empire. They do not care. They have interests. They don't have allies, and they do not care about people. They care about getting resources, stealing resources, getting full spectrum dominance by any means necessary. And when you see that there's 400 Yemeni children under the age of 5 could die from acute malnutrition because of this US-Saudi war and blockade on Yemen, and the US has been a part of this for 6 years, what kind of depraved, immoral people are they? People running this empire. Obama, Biden, Trump. George W. Bush, well, he's done other things. His father, he's done other awful things in other countries, killing 2 million Iraqis on wars on lies. These are the kind of depraved individuals running US empire. And some are prettier than others, some are more eloquent than others, but they're all depraved war criminals who belong in The Hague. And that's why they're always trying to shut down the International Crimes Court, because they know they're involved in war crimes, and they do not want the International Crimes Court to investigate them. And that's why they're always trying to shut them down or sanction members of the International Crimes Court, even threatening to invade them if they dare investigate or dare take Israel to the Criminal Crimes Court, the International Criminal Crimes Court, which they're talking about doing, that sort of thing. These are war criminals of the highest order in the US, the greatest purveyor of violence today, as Martin Luther King said. And I don't know how anybody with any kind of, it shows a complete spiritual death that these people like Biden, Obama, Trump, and all of that, all those people, Antony Blinken, all those different people, how they could look at any of those images of emaciated skeletal children. You know, a 10-year-old that is absolutely emaciated. 5-year-olds, babies crying because they're starving, babies. They could look at those images and think it's okay to continue on this US-backed. They were actually helping the Saudis with their bombing campaign a few years ago. This has been going on now, on and on and on, for years. The collective punishment of Yemenis. And the US is backing up its friend Saudi Arabia, no matter how awful they are, that head-shopping monarchy there, that's appalling. No matter how awful they are propping them up because the Saudis help them in the Middle East with their aims for full spectrum dominance, just like they have Israel helping them with that too. 3 of the biggest human rights abusers on the planet: Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the US empire. 3 of them. So anyway, that's I'll show you this. I'll show you this, and it explains a bit of the background a bit, and why there's this blockade and how it's affecting Yemenis. I mean, a lot of their food comes through the port of Hodeida, and and if there's a blockade and if there's no fuel getting through, well, it costs these parents, $80 to bring their child somewhere into a hospital, and most of the hospitals are sort of closed now. If they have no hospitals, well, there's just going to be dying children everywhere. I mean, there's dying children anyway. 440,000. 400,000 under the age of 5. 400,000. It's hard to live on a planet that's like this. It really is. It is hard to sort of, it's hard to just go about your daily business and try and live some sort of, normal life when this kind of abhorrent, hellish situation, which is completely avoidable and which is intentional, is allowed to go on. Or that it even happens, that there's even these monsters, even in power. They shouldn't be in charge of a chip shop, these people. They should be behind bars. So anyway, if you live in the US, I urge you to please, contact your local representatives, people in Congress, and just state your abhorrence to this, and that it must end. It must end. I mean, I know that, the sad thing is, the only thing that these people respond to is if they think that people may not vote for them again. Meaning, I'm not talking about the people in the upper echelons, but these sort of Congress members, they're worried about funding and they're worried about people not voting them in again. And maybe some of them might be like that, not all of them. But, is it any wonder, though, that what is happening within the US, the terrible poverty now, the abandonment of the people, the total no political will to bring in a $15 minimum wage, which is woefully under anyway. All those different things. They don't care if people are dying because they can't buy insulin. It's no wonder, is it? When you have people that can see 400,000 children under 5 skeletal and dying. Why should we be surprised with the shit show that's happening within the United States? Anyway, thanks for watching. Please check out this next segment. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Viga. Till next time. Bye for now.
The World Food Programme's warning Yemen's heading toward the biggest famine in modern history. The UN agency is projecting around 400,000 Yemeni children under the age of 5 could die from acute malnutrition this year as the US-backed Saudi war and blockade continues. We turn now to a shocking new report from inside Yemen by CNN's award-winning foreign correspondent, Naim El-Bahir, who will join us after. A warning to our audience, the video contains disturbing images.
The derelict coastline of the north of Yemen. Rusting hulks tell a story of war, blockade, and devastation. For years now, the Houthi-controlled north has been increasingly isolated from the outside world. We secretly traveled through the night by boat after our previous reporting here led the government to deny us entry. On the road to Hodeidah port, we get a sense of the humanitarian disaster kept from the outside world. Along the roadside, hundreds of stalled food supply trucks with no fuel to move. In a country in the grip of hunger, their cargo stands spoiling in the hot sun. The port of Hodeidah is the supply gateway for the rest of the country. It should be bustling with activity, but today it is eerily empty. A result of the US-backed Saudi blockade. The last tanker to dock here was in December. In the echoing silence, it dawns on us. We are about to witness the terrible impact of this blockade. Desperate patients and family members trying to get the attention of Dr. Khalid, chairman of Hodeidah's hospital. If he signs these papers, they get some financial relief for their treatments and medicines. He doesn't get far before he is stopped again and again. Since the Yemen war started 6 years ago, families have been in financial freefall. The fuel blockade has sped that descent into oblivion. This is the main hospital for Hodeidah province, and we're surrounded by doctors and nurses rushed off their feet.
This is a garden, our garden.
Is this a normal day? Is this busy all the time?
Not the busiest day.
This is not a busy day?
It's a normal day.
Wow. Dr. Khalid wants to show us some of his critical patients in the therapeutic feeding center. A 10-year-old girl whose growth has been so stunted by starvation, she can no longer stand. Dr. Khalid says every hour of every day they are receiving more and more cases of severe malnutrition that are this advanced because the parents can't afford to feed their children. They also can't afford to bring them to the hospital to treat them. The UN says pockets of Yemen are in famine-like conditions, but it says Hodeidah is not considered one of them because it doesn't meet the metrics to declare famine. But Dr. Khalid thinks the reality on the ground has outpaced the UN's projections. The Saudi fuel blockade is biting. Malnutrition numbers are spiking, and at the same time, this busy hospital is running out of the vital fuel that keeps its generators running. Which means that babies like Maryam, who doctors say at 2 months weighs the same as a newborn, would die. Yemen has been devastated by a civil war which has pitted Iran-backed Ansar Allah, known as Houthis, against the internationally recognized government and a US-backed, Saudi-led coalition. We're in Houthi territory. some of whose officials have been designated as terrorists by the US for targeting neighboring Saudi Arabia. We've been granted a rare interview with a leading Houthi official. We must meet in an undisclosed location because his aides say of the threat of assassination. We ask him to respond to allegations they are escalating this war.
Not true at all. The battle is continuing and it has not stopped.
Do you trust America to take forward negotiations to bring peace here in Yemen?
Trust must come about decisions. So far, we have not seen any concrete decisions being made.
You've spoken about being subjected as a nation to international terror, but 3 of the leaders within the Ansar Allah movement are designated by the US as terrorists. One of your key slogans talks about death to America. How do you see this as pushing forward the negotiation and the possibility for peace in the future?
When we say death to America, they effectively kill us with their bombs, rockets and blockades. They provide logistics and intelligence support and their actual participation in the battle. So who is bigger and greater? The ones who are killing us or the ones who say death to them?
The Biden administration has announced it has withdrawn support for the Saudi offensive, but it comes after 6 long years of war. And for the children dying of hunger, it still hasn't brought peace any quicker. Peace and help can't come soon enough.
Over half the hospitals in this district are threatened with shuttering. This is one of them. They need urgent support, urgent help. Can you imagine what it would do to this community if this facility was shut down? Look at the chaos that there is already here, and that's while it's functioning.
For years now, the UN has been warning that famine is coming to Yemen. Doctors across Yemen's north tell us famine has arrived. Another hospital witnessing wave after wave of children in the red zone. Severe malnourishment. Impoverished mothers desperate to keep their children alive are forced to make harrowing choices.
Just to get to the hospital, I stopped eating and drinking. Not even water, just to get him treated.
These doctors are keeping track of the numbers spiking beyond what they ever imagined.
The doctor was saying that in 2020, this population, 23% of the children under 5 here were severely malnourished. In 2021, they think that that number is going to go over 30%. There is no doubt in his mind, he says, that they here in Hajjah are in famine.
Nearly 3 years ago, the UN Security Council condemned the use of starvation as a method of warfare, demanding access to supplies that are necessary for food preparation, including water and fuel, be kept intact, here and in other conflicts. That clearly hasn't happened. What's more, the world has stopped caring. The UN needs almost $4 billion to staunch this crisis. They received less than half that from donors. Numbers don't lie, but numbers also don't reflect the full tragedy. This is Hassan Ali. 10 months and struggling to breathe, he came into the hospital 6 days ago. He keeps losing weight, even with the critical care he's receiving. Hours after we left, Hassan Ali died. One more child in Yemen that represents so much more pain. The doctors here are desperate for the world to see and to help. Ni'am al-Baghir, CNN, Hodeidah, Yemen.
That report again by CNN's award-winning correspondent Naima al-Baghir inside Yemen. Naima now joins us from Khartoum, Sudan. Naima, welcome back to Democracy Now! This is an absolutely devastating report. Rarely do reporters get in to show this. Explain how you did this.
Well, we had an application for a visa in with the Saudi-backed internationally recognized government out of Aden for about 8 to 9 months, so from autumn last year, and we just kept being given the runaround. They wouldn't refuse it, but they also wouldn't outright give it to us, and at the same time it was becoming clear that the situation inside Yemen was deteriorating much more rapidly than any of the aid agencies had actually up until that point believed. And so we, our amazing senior producer Barbara Vanitides and our senior photojournalist Alex Platt made the decision, backed by CNN, that it was worth taking this risk and traveling by boat to the north of Yemen through those waters that are patrolled by Saudi warships and through those waters where the Saudi blockade is maintained from. And frankly, even having read so much of the data before we arrived, we were utterly unprepared for what we found when we got there. It was, I don't know that words can do justice to what the situation is like there. When the World Food Programme call it hell on earth, I think that is the only way you can understand what life is like for Yemenis.
And hearing the devastating cries of the malnourished children, the infants, and those that have died and continue to die, what was Saudi Arabia's response to this report?
We didn't receive one. We didn't receive an on-the-record report. After the piece first aired, minutes later, the Saudi ambassador to the U.S., Princess Rima bint Bandar, released a flood of commentary to the Saudi-based English language newspaper Arab News, speaking about how the Houthis, what their role was in this, saying that the Houthis didn't want peace, but fundamentally not engaging with the basic foundation of our reporting, which is that a Saudi blockade that has stopped fuel tankers from going in for over 2 months is exacerbating the financial and humanitarian crisis and is bringing the country over the precipice into oblivion. That is, and by the way, the United States has also not responded in a very clear manner to us as to whether they continue to support this blockade, because the blockade exists because at the start of the war, then President Obama and now President Biden allowed the Saudi-led coalition to blockade land, sea, and air ports into Yemen. So this exists because of the acquiescence of the United States. And the United States has not engaged with us in any way on the impact of that.
Okay, how has the U.S. responded to this report?
They denied the basic premise of our reporting, which is that these ships had been blocked from entry into Hodeidah port and were in international waters, but these waters at the moment are patrolled by the Saudi-led coalition and controlled by the Saudi-led coalition further north off the Saudi port of Jazan. They told us that in spite of the evidence that we show in that reporting and in spite of the screen grabs that we have online showing where they are on independent commercial vessel tracking apps, that actually this wasn't true, that these ships were off the port of Hodeidah and that the flow of food remains unimpeded through the port of Hodeidah, which again is categorically not true. And this is from the US envoy to Yemen. This is the person who is supposed to be pushing for a peaceful solution to the situation there.
And this is the new U.S. Special Envoy to Yemen, Tim Lenderking?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, on Thursday, USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is now headed by Samantha Powers, a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, notified Congress that it would resume some aid to Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, reversing the Trump-era policy. But humanitarian groups say Yemenis need far more help. Okay, talk about the significance of this.
Well, the issue is, what are you going to deliver aid with if there is no fuel? And we're not, I mean, this is not an issue that's up for debate. There's a UN resolution, Resolution 2417, which Ms. Powers should be very aware of, given the role that she played for the US and the UN, that says that not only should states be wary and fight against the use of starvation as a weapon of war, but that states must also allow for the means of food delivery systems, for the means of food preparation systems. And that means that access to fuel and water are critical. And if you deny that access, then essentially you are engaging in the use of starvation as a weapon of war. So, and I find it slightly concerning that you know, of course it's meaningful that aid is resuming to Houthi areas, but many aid agencies, including the UN, actually are reliant on the import of food. And supporting Yemenis in access to that imported food. Again, when you import food, it arrives at the port of Hodeidah, how are you getting it to the population without fuel?
And I should say that Samantha Powers was nominated to be head of USAID, the administrator nominee. Talk about the scope now, what the UN Secretary General has said about the scope of the problem, saying last week a donors conference netted $1.7 billion for humanitarian relief in Yemen. Less than half of you reported this, almost $4 billion needed to prevent widespread famine in Yemen.
I go back to the head of WFP, David Beasley's comment. It is hell on earth. There's no other way of putting it. When parents are faced with the choice of either feeding themselves, feeding their other children, or being able to afford to pay for the fuel, to take that child to be fed in a therapeutic feeding center, then you have gone out beyond the edge of what should be acceptable to the civilized world. It is a simple fix. Removing that fuel blockade immediately brings down the fuel prices. So parents were telling us that even coming from nearby provinces to the hospital we show you in the piece, it was costing something like $80. Can you imagine $80 in a country like Yemen? So fuel is more accessible. Fund the UN. The World Health Organization was providing some of that fuel to hospitals. For months now, it hasn't been able to provide any. So actually commit to funding the UN. But fundamentally also send the message that this is unacceptable, that you cannot blockade a nation of a basic necessity. That will allow some of this impact to be contained for a peaceful solution to be reached. But the US, Tim Lenderking, the US envoy, speaks about how they are pushing for peace as an absolute priority. What are you saving these? What are you bringing peace to if people are dying, if their children are dying? Bringing the parties back to the negotiating table is absolutely integral to a sustained solution to this. Peace is integral to a sustained solution. But people are dying right now.
The Biden administration says they're reviewing President Trump designating the Houthis as a terrorist organization, the significance of this, and we just have 15 seconds.
Well, they have now suspended that, so that they have now removed that. So that has been very, very important for allowing food imports. But again, without fuel, where is that food arriving to?